Thank you, sir. Greetings, fellow adventurers and citizens of the great kingdom of Unspamalot. My name's Jessa Moon, as Logan said, and today I am here to invite you to join me on a great quest. Now, to succeed on this quest, each one of you is going to need to demonstrate courage, cunning, and collaboration. But I believe that with time and dedication, you will have the opportunity to create email magic. Now, before I get too far into this, you may be asking yourself, who is this stranger and why is she talking at me? Well, again, I'm Jessa Moon. I have worn many hats in my life, some of them silly, and I have carried many titles, some of them also silly. But today, I am but a humble storyteller and guide, and it is my hope that through telling my story, I can offer you a few tools as you go out on your journey. We start with the hero's journey. Now, each of us has followed our own unique path as we've traveled here today, and we all are the hero of our own unique story. My story begins in a village by the shore where a younger version of myself dreamed of becoming an artiste and practitioner of the fine arts. So when I came of age, I traveled to the halls of high academia where I studied the great masters and honed my skills as an artiste. There I learned that I could take a vague idea and make it into reality using an iMac, a Magic Mouse, and an inkjet printer. And soon, I had redirected my studies towards the graphic arts. But traditional media was not enough for me. My mind had been opened to the deep mysteries of the World Wide Web, and I longed to understand it. So by day, I studied art, and by night, I experimented with HTML and Angel Fire. Okay, you all know, you know. As I started conjuring code, my first spell that I ever learned was view source. I used it to peel away the surface of my favorite websites and dissect the language that made them work. And as I coded my first table-based monstrosity, there was so much that I had to learn. Those who were brave enough to venture past its animated GIF iron gates were assailed by flaming text and angsty poetry. I have come so far. And when I was finally ready to leave the halls of high academia, clutching my certificate of computer print graphics, I ventured out to the illuminated lands of Designia. And there, for several years, I worked with a sign maker shop, putting graphics on everything from magnets to a monster truck. I got to put flames on the side of a monster truck. And then I transitioned into a role with a local direct mail marketing company, and there I designed, printed, folded, and cut just about anything made out of paper. And when I was not working or tending to my paper cuts, I was still indulging in my curiosity with code. And eventually, one day, my boss came into the office and said, "We really, really, really need a new website." And I just raised my hand and offered to lend my services. And soon enough, we had a shiny new website, and I had a shiny new dual title, designer and developer. And with that title, I transitioned into a role with a marketing agency that was looking for someone who spoke the dialects of Adobe and Dreamweaver. And I entered the world of email as an inexperienced squire, coding table-based, image-based email blasts. Whew. Those were the days. Um, with time, I learned the alchemy of accessibility, and I learned modular design and worked my way up from that inexperienced squire to a role as a codesmith crafting responsive email for over 150 individual small business clients. And when I decided that I was ready for a new adventure, I cast my eyes towards the depths of the devlands and went in search of a role in development specifically. There, I spent time building my character, working with brands like Ibotta and Going, building their email code bases from the ground up. And though I had abandoned my title of designer to some extent, I found that I was using my design know-how every single day. And what I discovered was in working with designers in the sort of assembly line model of email production where it starts in one team and then gets passed to another team and then gets passed to another team, that even though the designers I was working with, even those who had worked in web design, they were fantastic as typographists and illustrators. They were creating really brilliant design, but they knew very, very little about email or how email rendering worked. And so occasionally, I would have to send designs back because they had sent me something that just couldn't be done in email. Or I would have to spend a lot of extra time creating custom solutions to get around a particular tricky design element. And every now and then, someone would come to me when I had solved a particularly tricky puzzle and say something like, "Jessa, you're a wizard." And I would have to respond with, "No, I'm not a wizard. I've just been doing this for a while." I had spent time building my character as an email designer and developer, and I happened to have tools and skills that my colleagues didn't. So I decided that moving forward, anytime somebody was willing to listen, I would take a few minutes to help them better understand what it is that I did. The point that I tried to make to people as I welcomed them into my pool of knowledge was that you don't have to know how to code to understand development. There are a set of concepts that you can learn, and as you grow to understand them, they will help you design or plan, strategize in a way that plays into development, and that opens up a lot of doors to what you can do, what kind of possibilities you have for your email campaigns just by understanding a little bit more about how email development works. So, my suggestion is to start with the basics. You don't have to code, but just grabbing those basic concepts of development and then identifying your areas of strength and weakness and gradually leveling up as you go. So in the world of Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop gaming, players start with a character sheet. It's a tool that lets them identify their character's history, they can write down their backstory, and they can identify their occupation or class, and then they get a set of points that they can assign to a variety of skills and spells and tools and that sort of thing. Well, I see no reason why I can't take that concept of a character sheet and apply it to the world of design and development. So that's what I've done. Behold, your very own Adventures in Email Design and Development character sheet. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going through this entire thing because we don't have that kind of time today. But I have taken the things that I think are important for designers or just marketers in general who are working in email things that they can know, can learn to help them understand how email development works, because then the more you know about something, the easier it is to work with. So I have broken this down into 5 categories, and I just made them up. They're not like any official development thing, but I tried to lump my concepts into 5 different categories as sort of like a simplification. And I'm going to make this sheet available for you. There will be a QR code at the end of the presentation, so you can grab it. But you can use it as a study guide. You can use it as a QC checklist. You can use it as a learning tool to give to your coworkers. But hopefully it will help you, as you leave here, track down some of these concepts. But I'm going to briefly touch on some of my favorite points, and we'll go from there. So the categories are accessibility, flexibility, embellishment, optimization, and resilience. And again, I just made those up because I could. There are definitely concepts in here that could probably fall in multiple categories, or you might throw them in a different one, but I'm the one standing up here, so I get to say. So starting with accessibility, I'm going to touch on some basics, and then there are also bonus actions for each category that are concepts that you can study after you've got the basics down in order to level up. Starting with accessibility. So when we think of accessibility, we tend to think of very absolute total disability, or the obvious static visibility issues. But it's important when you are learning about accessibility to think beyond the static, to think beyond the still. Things like friendly frame rate, identifying the frame rates that will not cause flashing that could potentially trigger seizures, or considering how your email is processed by screen reader technology. You might be surprised by how accessible technology responds to some very mundane sorts of things that we commonly see in marketing emails. For example, strike-through text. Screen readers often just ignore the strike-through styling. So if you're using the common format of previous price, current price, and you aren't taking the time in development to add little extra bits of code there, then your subscriber who is using a screen reader to listen to your email might hear both prices and not know which one is the actual current valid price. If you're testing with screen readers also, you might find some unusual little things that screen readers do with punctuation. For example, this is an example that came up with an email when I was at Going. We were trying to list how many of a person's total followed destinations were currently running a special. And it was formatted in the design 1/10 destinations. But if we had left it like that, and it went through a screen reader, chances are most of them would have read, "You have flight deals at 1/10 destinations." On a rare occasion, we might run into one that said something like, "You have flight destinations at 1/10 destinations." Obviously, neither of those is really what we're going for. We know that we want to say 1/10 destinations. And so I let the designers know that this was a possible issue, and they updated it so that it spelled out the word "of" to get around that problem. So if you're not testing, looking at screen readers occasionally with running your copy through to see what happens, I highly recommend that you do. You might find some strangeness, but you don't know to look for it or listen for it unless you know. The next section is flexibility. So this is related to responsive design, mobile responsiveness, and your email's ability to shrink, expand, the content's ability to stack and flow based on the screen size. So you want to know, how does content flow as you're going from one screen size to another? Can you change the order of things? Can you change the positioning of things? Knowing what you're able to do will help you as you're designing. So if you're not already including mobile view in your design mockups, I highly recommend it. Even if you just design some of the modules or some of the sections of email where you know that there might be a strange or uncommon rearrangement of content, your developers who come after the design team will thank you for giving them a heads up on what it is that you expect to happen. And then if you're using personalized content, if you have variable data or personalizing the person's name, that sort of thing, you want to make sure that your design is accounting for a variety of character counts. Because your header might look fantastic if it reads flights to Paris, but what happens when your subscriber is headed to Copenhagen? You're going to make sure that you're accommodating various character counts when designing. Make sure that your design is flexible enough to accommodate a range of character counts. And the same applies if you're including values like prices or dates. Make sure that you're including space for extra numbers, digits, decimals, and commas, especially if your content varies according to the country of the recipient, because the punctuation will differ. And so if you want to level up in this category, my recommendation would be to look into CSS styles sheets. Look into things that control background size and position. Look into the box model and spacing, because understanding what is possible through style sheets will help give you ideas about what you can do with future designs, as opposed to thinking very statically, like mobile is not just email that's smaller. You want the experience to differ based on the environment, and so understanding CSS concepts, even if you aren't sitting down to write the code, will give you ideas, give you opportunities that wouldn't be there if you didn't already know them. The next category is embellishment. So this has to do with customization and progressive enhancement, the little bells and whistles that we add to our designs to make them more engaging. It's important to know which of those you can actually do in email. So support for things like animation, custom fonts, shadows, and rounded corners that are not universally supported by all email clients. So it helps to know which ones are supported, where they're supported. Take a look at your customer base if you can find out where your subscribers are opening, which platforms, which devices, etc. Then you can hone your design features according to where your customers are actually viewing them. And as a bonus action, talk to your developer friends about what happens when you overlap elements, like when you place text on top of a background, or you have one shape slightly overlapping the other, because that can impact a variety of things, including how likely it is that your email is going to clip in Gmail. I have what I like to refer to as the birthday cake model, or the birthday cake theory of email design to code efficiency. So if you think about every one of your bells and whistles in your email design, whether it's a drop shadow, an extra custom font, special CSS, like any little added flair that you add. So every container on the screen in your email design is like a sheet cake. And so every time you add another block of color on top of another block of color with a border, you're adding an extra level, an extra tier to your cake. And each time you add a drop shadow or a border or a custom font, that's another layer of icing and frosting and piped letters, and eventually, if you go too far, you end up with a 6-tier cake with 3 different flavors and a handcrafted sugar rose stopper. And so a very simple text-based email, for example, it's like a nice vanilla sheet cake with some very delicately piped lettering. But a more complex email design requires those extra layers, the extra flavors, and all the time that it takes, and all the code that it takes to create that. And when you have that really elaborate cake, it is beautiful, but you might have trouble fitting it in the delivery van, and your guests at the birthday party may get tired of waiting for it to show up. So that is the birthday cake model of email design to code efficiency. That brings me to optimization. So this has to do with image preparation and accuracy, and involves knowing what the best use cases are for different image file types. So when to use a JPEG, when to use a PNG, when to use a GIF. I was actually really surprised to see in my experience that this was something that not a lot of designers were familiar with, especially if they were coming from print. So understanding which one of those to use for a photo or which one to use for a logo will help a lot with file size and load time. Also understanding what the requirements are for an animation and how that impacts how you compress your images, and how fast fast or slow it will take for it to load. And then units of measurement. Find out which units of measurement are most appropriate for things like image sizes and font sizes. I highly recommend working with integers whenever possible. When we use whole numbers, we get around the complication of asking our screens to interpret what is like 1/10 of a pixel. But if we're using whole numbers, we don't have to deal with that. And for bonus action, ask your developer friends for more information on the design impact of HTML, but also look into ways that you can more efficiently lay out content in order to reduce code. You may or may not know that the file size of your email document, once it reaches 102 kilobytes, chances are it's going to clip in Gmail. So finding out how you can optimize your images and your design in order to avoid that. And lastly, our last category is resilience, and this has to do with adapting to dark mode and other user environment differences. Understanding the difference between color inversion versus custom styling, and which email platforms allow you to do what. There are a variety of different ways that email service providers process color, and if you're not prepared for that, the results can be fairly disastrous. One of the surprises that I've run into is seeing that very few people are testing their brand colors in dark mode before they grow, before they develop an affection for the particular color. Like, test in dark mode, because you don't want your crisp, clean ivory email to look like a muddy, manure-colored mess for your dark mode users. And I'm saying this from experience. It's not pretty. But yeah, have one of your developers take all of your proposed brand colors, throw them into a table, throw some text over them, and see what happens in dark mode, and then decide which ones you're going to keep. And then another bonus action that I've found particularly useful is understanding how you can use transparency in images, transparent backgrounds, in order to create interesting experiences in dark mode. When it comes to imagery and background images, I have had to spend a lot of time with designers, helping them to understand how to interpret or prepare background images and illustrations and that sort of thing for a life in dark mode. At Going, we had a really talented illustrator who took a lot of time to create this huge library of custom illustrations that were really fun, really played into the character of the company, but didn't do so great in dark mode at first. Womp, 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 womp. because they were transparent, we lost a lot of the shapes, and the really gorgeous line art just melted away. I suggested that they fill in some of the color, and so they assumed that what I meant was by just putting it on a block. And yes, this makes the illustrations easier to see, but it is really kind of just awkward and clunky and ugly. So I suggested that we add a stroke around the illustration, and that's a little better, but it's kind of cramped, kind of makes it feel a little busy because the strokes are so similar in weight to the line art. So after I had taken the time to explain to our illustrator exactly what was happening with these, she came up with a really great idea, which was to freehand these really like active, energetic shapes around all of the illustrations. We started referring to it as stickerizing, because in dark mode, it kind of does look like you've slapped a die-cut sticker on the screen. And we loved that vibe so much that before too long, those sticker-style shapes and tape and torn paper, that kind of like physical media concept started cropping up in all kinds of emails going out. And it became a kind of like part of the company's character to use this design. In fact, it went as far as we printed stickers for the entire staff because we loved that idea so much. But this only happened, we only found this design opportunity because our designer took the time to sit with me and learn a little bit more about how dark mode worked. I have just blown through all of that really quickly, and there is so much content that I could present to you, but we don't have that kind of time. I am hoping that right now you're not feeling too overwhelmed by the things that I just like rapid fire ran through, because you don't have to learn this all overnight. It took me years to learn all of these little idiosyncrasies, and I would not expect for you to also to learn all of this in a brief period of time. So remember to start with the basics, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and level up as you go. And if you get to the point where you're starting to feel panicked, remember, you don't have to go alone. Chances are that there is someone either in your office or on the internet who will talk to you, who will help you learn more if you just reach out and ask questions. You just have to find your allies. And in the theme of Dungeons and Dragons, what that would look like is assembling an adventure party. If you look at tabletop gaming or fantasy adventure, rarely does the hero travel alone. Generally, they will either start with a group of friends, or they will gradually gather allies all along the road and succeed by combining their skills and assets together. So, you don't have to go alone. Find your allies, whether that is your coworker on another team or someone in your community. Look for somebody who knows more about the things that you don't. Ask them questions, communicate about the things that you know and the things that they know. Put your heads together, because you're going to get farther by building a communal pool of resources than if you just tried to do it yourself. And once you have identified your allies, pull your resources together and then make sure that your priorities are aligned. It really helps to spend time talking to the people that you work with about how they work. What is their work style? What are their needs? How do they look at email? It's kind of like if you are really skilled with a bow and arrow. It helps to find an ally who can really swing an axe. And then you need somebody to help you heal when you run into injuries. So you can find a healer or a wizard to conjure spells. But you have to understand one another to correctly assemble all of those abilities together in a way that makes sense. One of the greatest opportunities that I've had in my career, one of my greatest advantages, has been that in doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I have been able to gather perspectives, multiple perspectives from different areas of specialization and combine them together in a way that I never would have understood if I had not been exposed to those different areas of specialty. And because I had a toolkit of reusable knowledge from different areas, I was able to prepare in a way that I wouldn't have. I was able to see opportunities and possibilities that I would not have had if I had just stayed in my lane. When I was in my marketing days, my agency days, I had to assemble email, design and develop email for a client set of over 150 small businesses. And I realized that I had to go faster. I had to be more efficient. And so as I learned more about development, I found ways to speed up parts of the process. I ended up with this enormous master template of modules, and from it, I could pick and choose pieces that I knew that would work together in order to custom skin and rapid fire produce for various companies. And the benefit to assembling that toolkit with the knowledge that I had from various backgrounds, I could skip a lot of the tedium that I was experiencing in having to design everything in my design software first, and then rebuild it all over in my development software. I could skip a lot of that and go straight to the fun part, because I knew I was going to be able to throw that template together really quickly. I could spend a lot more time creating really engaging graphics and a lot less time doing the very mundane, tedious tasks that I previously had to do. And so that experience is a big part of what motivated me to specialize in modular systems, and it drove me to take more time learning about the people who came before and after me in the email production process so that I could take what I had learned and use tools that I was familiar with to open doors for them as well, and not just myself. And that not only made me more productive, but it made my team more productive. We were able to lower our stress levels, reduce frustration, do more with less, and we had more time to come up with creative solutions and explore design options like interactivity and things that we just would never have had time for if we had all just stayed in our own little corners. Here's a visual example kind of what I love to do with modular systems. I spent some time working with the design team at Going and helped them create a modular system that exists both in Figma for the design team and Litmus for the development team. And so they have a almost menu of modules that they can work off of that we created together in a way that served both of our needs. And then because we had created this, we could then give it to our strategists who could use it as a menu and go through and pick specifically which modules they felt would best fit the content that they were planning to send to us. And once we had picked those modules, our designers could just completely skip over creating an entire header to footer mock-up and just create really cool illustrations and headers, and then pass those files on to the developers to plug in really quickly in development. So we're not rebuilding, not reinventing the wheel for every single email. We're skipping to the fun part. And the only reason that we were able to accomplish what we did is that we all agreed to try something new. We agreed to tackle challenges that we had previously avoided in the past by doing that together. There is inevitably a point in every hero's journey where they have to decide whether to turn around and retreat to the familiar or to forge ahead towards the unknown. And so my challenge to you is to face obstacles in email with courage and cunning instead of retreating to the familiar. Look for opportunity in every obstacle. Explore new paths, test the waters, learn from your mistakes, and you can make magical transformations happen. In the world of Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy adventure, consider the sorcerer. A sorcerer just casts magic willy-nilly into the ether in hopes that something will stick and they will discover their ultimate power. They might steal somebody else's notes to try and accomplish some great feat, but they are not taking the time to understand what it is that they're working with. Whereas a wizard takes his time. He studies the mysteries, he seeks advice from mentors, and he learns through trying and growing and gradually building his knowledge until he achieves wisdom. And with that wisdom, he can conjure magic knowingly, knowing what's going to happen, and with courage and with wisdom. So, a great example of this is this email from Scott's Cheap Flights. Back before Going became Going, we were Scott's Cheap Flights. And we ran into occasional issues where the design team wanted to use background images, and they would often have gradients, or it would be like photos of sky, etc. And because I had experience with both design and development, because I understood resilience and working with dark mode, I was able to conjure the effect of an email that transformed from daytime in light mode to nighttime in dark mode. And it looks like magic. It looks like magic when you don't understand how it works. But really, I was just combining my knowledge of optimization with my skills in resilience. And even though the effect is pretty cool, it takes very minimal effort when you know how that it works. Basically, it just boils down to a couple of cleverly sliced header and footer images combined with a background fill using HTML. But the impact is this magical transformation. And that's just because most people who look at it don't understand how it works. The great wizard of science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke, said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's really all that's at play here. It looks like magic to those who don't understand it. What I challenge you all to do on your quest is to remember to be a wizard, not a sorcerer, by tapping into your knowledge resources in your community or in your office, by gradually using your experience with others to build your character, and by having courage to try new things, learn from your mistakes, and level up as you go, you can make magical transformations that you never would have been able to make happen if you had not taken the time to grow. Seek your knowledge, build character, find your allies, have courage, and make your magical transformations. And with that, I thank you all for joining me on this journey, and I thank the wonderful leaders of Unspam for giving me this opportunity to geek out with you. You can get your character sheet using the QR code. and I wish you all well. May the dice roll ever in your favor. Thank you.